Welcome to Anything is Possible. I'm doing a lot better this week. Thank goodness for concealer. I'm able to look pretty much normal again. My left arm is still not in great shape, but it's getting there slowly but surely. So this week I wanted to cover something about the structure of houses and how they're laid out, which is kind of surprising. I really didn't know how much that would impact my life when I moved here. Houses here are built with brick and concrete block for the most part, and then it's covered with a layer of stucco, usually textured of some sort. Some of the homes have what's called a boveda ceiling, which is arched brickwork. And that was actually developed, I believe, in Spain. But what it does is the heat goes up and gets trapped in the arches of the ceiling. So during the hot weather, it actually is a very good cooling type of design. It's impossible if you look online and find a house that you are interested in and you want to look at it. In the United States, you can usually just do a drive-by and see what the neighborhood's like and see what the house looks like if you get a feel for it. But here, I mean, you actually can see what the neighborhood is like and what the street is like. But pretty much all the houses are behind walls. They're enclosed in stone walls with gates, and it's all locked up. So most part, I mean, sometimes there are open grow work that you can see through, but for the most part, you cannot tell until you actually enter the grounds what it's going to look like behind those walls. It's kind of interesting right now because there's a house being built near me, and I've been taking pictures as they're building it, but they haven't even started on the house yet. They've been spending weeks building this containing wall, which is probably about, maybe 14 to 18 feet high. And it's solid brick, and they dug down 3 feet below the ground level, filled it up with concrete and rock, and made a level top on top of that. And then on top of that, then they start building the brick wall. Most of the buildings that are being built now are not unreinforced brick anymore. And apparently, from what the research I did, in earthquake areas, which this isn't a prime earthquake area, but there are a lot of areas in Mexico that are, this type of building is actually really, really resistant to earthquakes. It's called confined masonry. But they use vertical rebar tie columns and build the brick walls in between those, and then they have solid forms that they pour concrete into those, and so it ties the entire wall to a really solid form. So there is flexibility in the brick, but it's actually held on as tight as it would be with reinforced concrete. So they're actually very earthquake resistant, and that's one of the reasons why in this area we had a recent earthquake. There was virtually no damage, probably some cracking in the exterior stucco that goes on top. But the stucco and the brick actually gradually breaks down if it gets moist. And it gives off these minerals that's called Salitre, and that will bubble up along the bottom parts of the walls. You can see it inside some houses, and when that happens, it's time to scrape all of that off and treat it with an acid treatment, and then restucco the walls. So if you're actually going to buy a house or even are renting a house, this stuff can actually become somewhat friable. And I have heard people that have had breathing problems from inhaling too much of the salitre that is let loose into the air. although I did an online search and I couldn't find any actual research on health problems related to the Salitre, but just something to look for. It's better if you can find a house that's had that taken care of or that it's a newer structure. One of the things that some people tend to find kind of disturbing when they're walking down the streets in Mexico is all the razor wire, wrought iron on the windows and doors, and spikes at the tops of the walls. It looks kind of threatening to anybody that doesn't live here, but once you live here for a while, you kind of realize that all the houses are built that way. It's a security measure. In fact, some of the older houses have concrete at the top of the wall and embedded broken bottles and glass. It's not very common to see that anymore, but that is one of the ways that they used to keep people from climbing over the walls. There isn't a lot of problems, I think mostly because people know they can't climb over the walls. And the other thing is electric, like an electric fence basically at the top of the wall. So that we'll get a pretty good shock if you try and get through the wall. So I'm just showing some pictures here on some of the examples of what that looks like when you're walking down the street. Everybody seems to have their own method when they build their house of how they're going to have security. And of course, the top security is when you're actually living in a gated community. If you really want to have security, that is one of the ways to do it. So another thing is that if you're a real avid gardener, it's kind of not real super common to have big yards. More expensive houses tend to do have yards, and a lot of them have paid gardeners. But if you're an avid gardener, you're going to have to look for a house that actually isn't completely paved or tiled or in some other way gravels, paths. It's real common here just to use potted plants on a paved patio, and does away with all of the lawn and the gardening issues. Of course, if you're a renter, that's kind of a good idea anyway, because if you move, you can take your plants with you. I was surprised by that, how, especially in the larger cities, how it's not very common to have a garden, or at least not to have, I came from having an acre of land, and that was not uncommon at all for Southern Oregon. People have much larger plots of ground and farm animals and stuff, and here that's just, it's not done unless you're out in the country and you have animals and you have an actual farm. Another thing that's real common besides having paved patio areas is what they call miradors. And a mirador is basically a rooftop patio, and then you get spectacular views, especially here at Lake Chapala, that allows you to sometimes get a lake view when you're not that close to the lake. And if not, you get nice mountain views or just views over the rooftops where you can sit up there and eat dinner and watch the sunset. And the house where I am doesn't have that, and so I am down in my walled garden, and that's where I am. And if I want to see the sunset, then I need to actually drive down to the lake and watch the sunset there. Roofs are usually terracotta. So the advantages of the brick construction, in addition to being earthquake proof, they don't rot, and they aren't, house fires are kind of non-existent here. My next video I'll be covering what utilities are like here, electricity and water and sewer and all, or lack thereof. Fires aren't a problem, even with the kind of sketchy electric work that is sometimes in the houses. there is nothing that can catch fire because they're all built of brick. One thing that really surprised me, because I like to do woodworking, is that I've never seen a house that actually had a real garage. And here I came from an area where two-car garages that were enclosed were so common. You could park in and have half the garage be a workbench and do all kinds of projects in out of the elements. Not so here. A lot of places don't even have parking off of the street. You have to find yourself a place to park on the street. Regular residential areas commonly do have carports, and they will call those garages, but they're really not enclosed. They're just a carport. It's a roof that protects your car from hailstorms or whatever that may come along. That was one thing that actually led me to renting a 3-bedroom place rather than a 2-bedroom place, because storage garages are pretty much unheard of in terms of storing your stuff in a storage rental unit. There is one here in Ahihic, but it's really hard to get hold of, and I imagine it's probably pretty expensive. So I decided the best option would be for me to get a 3-bedroom house. So I would have my bedroom, and I would have a spare bedroom for guests, and I would have another bedroom which would just basically be storage for all of my tools and all my hobby stuff and all my framed photographs from my dad and everything that I needed to store that I normally would put into a storage garage in the United States or into a enclosed car garage. There's neither here. So that led me to looking for the 3-bedroom home where 1 bedroom is actually just storage. And I do have a carport. So when I want to do a woodworking project, I just go and get my tools out of the spare bedroom, take them out to the carport, and I put them back away at night and just work on my woodworking project in the carport. Street maintenance and streets in general, people always have that question when they're moving down here. Different towns vary a lot. Larger big cities tend to have much better paved sidewalks and streets. I understand that Puebla is one of the best cities in terms of having nice, smooth, paved sidewalks, very walkable. And the Lake Chapala area, and by and large, is not that user-friendly. So if you have a handicap, if you're walk with a walker or a cane or unsteady on your feet, the pavement here is really quite uneven. And you're constantly stepping up and down, broken pavement, holes in the sidewalk, and a lot of it could be cobblestones where you can easily turn your ankle or fall. So I can't encourage people to move to this particular area that are having stability problems. Maintenance, my particular street is a great example. The cobblestones are long gone. There's street stones poking up out of the mud and the dirt. There's a live spring, so water runs down my road constantly and it washes out all of the dirt. There's big ruts, And the municipality is in charge of maintenance, and they just don't seem to have any urgency about maintaining the streets at all. So you have to just learn to be very careful when you're walking. Try not to go in any of the ruts and get your tires stuck. Be careful of the mud. And when it rains, the street basically turns into a river. So you just kind of have to stay home. And that's just the way it is. They're talking about maybe they'll getting around to do something with the street by next summer, and here it is, November. So that's months away, and they've been talking about it for over 2 years. So things don't happen very quickly here, and it's just a way of life. Property taxes are incredibly low here. I mean, I don't even know because I'm not a homeowner, but I understand that they're just, laughably small, and so there just really isn't much money for road maintenance. Kind of in a nutshell, things to look out for, surprises to me. The big ones were not having garages where I could store things and do woodworking projects and that sort of thing, and the lack of gardens. And I did actually get a rental house that has a small garden. And I do a lot of potted plants, but I also have put some things in the ground. But quite honestly, the days of big vegetable garden and huge trees and that sort of thing, unless you have a lot of money, then you can afford to have a house that has a great big garden. But by and large, even a lot of the more expensive houses don't really have gardens at all. So plan accordingly. Either scale down your belongings before you come so you don't need to store things, or plan on getting a spare room in the house where you're heading, so that you can store the things that you would normally store in a garage. Thanks a lot for watching. I appreciate you. Don't forget to give it a like and comment. Ask me any questions if you want. And I will next time be covering utilities, and those are pretty different here too. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good one. Bye.